Why do smart people make big mistakes, and what can you do to avoid the traps? G'day, are you seeking to be a high-performance CEO? Or to manage your own life and develop personal leadership skills to be a CEO in your own life? Then you've come to the right place, because we share real experiences from CEOs for you to learn from. And so you don't miss out, click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notifications. Let's get into it. Making mistakes and failing is a part of life. And as a CEO, we are met with that on an almost daily basis. In fact, we used phrases like failing quickly and failing forward to try to underpin the fact that failure is just a part of the process of building a company. Now, we don't want to make fatal mistakes, and it's that area of mistakes that I want to focus on today, particularly very smart people making really bad mistakes. Let's get into it. Several years ago, a lady made a fatal mistake. Now, she was a very intelligent lady with a tested IQ of greater than 170. She was in a relationship and she was having some troubles with her boyfriend. And he went away for the weekend and she felt that he was ignoring her. So she decided to go to his home and to get into the house. And she walked around and thought that perhaps he was hiding in the house. And so she had a really bright idea. How about she climbed up onto the roof and see if she could get in that way? And there was a chimney, and she decided to climb down the chimney. Now, if you don't know, and this is not about being smart, this is about knowledge, chimneys are shaped like a cone, narrow at the bottom and bigger at the top. So what might appear like a tube going down that you could get your hips and waist and shoulders into actually will narrow down as you go further down. And of course, she decided to try to climb down and get into the house that way, unaware of the fact that she was getting stuck. And the more she would struggle and wriggle, the tighter and tighter this would be. Now, unfortunately, nobody could hear her calls, and the boyfriend was away for many days. And unfortunately, in that terrible situation, she passed away. And it wasn't discovered for many days when he discovered her in his home, stuck in the chimney. So a very, very intelligent lady with a very, very high IQ made a fatal mistake. When we talk about smart people, we often include the term IQ. Having a high IQ means you're very, very smart. Now, IQ is a standardized form of testing which attempts to graph the whole population under a statistical bell curve, where the middle of the bell curve is 100. So if you're average in intelligence or average in IQ, then you want to have a score of 100. And the higher you are, the more intelligent you are. So, for example, Bill Gates is said to have an IQ of 160. Isaac Newton, famous for his breakthroughs in science, is said to have an IQ of 190. However, we have to take that with a pinch of salt, because there was no tests back when Isaac Newton was around for IQ. And controversially, perhaps Elon Musk, very well known, very successful, has an IQ in some references around 100, 115, in other references around 160. So IQ is not necessarily a firm science, and there are definitely different ways that people are smart. For example, if you're a great creator, creating music, then you would be smart when it comes to music. So when we talk about intelligence quotient or IQ, we have to be careful that that's only one form of being smart. Being smart and having a high IQ are not necessarily determinations of success. Dr. Karl, who's a famous science journalist in Australia and now podcaster, is famous for his quote about his own intelligence. And he says, "I'm not particularly smart," he says. "My IQ is in the category of about 2/3 of the population. That's between about 85 and 115. But I'm very well educated, because once upon a time, the Australian government thought it was important to invest in education." Now, if you listen to Dr. Karl as I do, you would think he's very smart, and he certainly is very articulate and very good at explaining things. What about another example, more broadly? Chinese entrepreneur Jack Ma. Now, he's worth $25.2 billion. Now, he has a very interesting history of failures. He is the current founder and CEO of Alibaba, massive, successful company. But he failed many times at school, and famously, he went for a job at KFC, and I quote, 31 different odd entry level jobs, and was rejected every single one. I went for a job with KFC. They said, "You're no good." And out of, I think it was 23 were accepted, and he was the only one not accepted for a job at KFC. So being successful and being smart are not necessarily tied together. I was reading a story about a family who trusted all of their finances to their very bright young son. He was very good at mathematics, and they trusted him enough with his decisions to take care of all the family finances. Now, one day, this smart young boy went to his brother and said, "Hey, do you want to invest in this guaranteed way to make more money?" Less smart brother said, "No thanks, I don't have any money and I don't want to do that right now." Anyhow, he went on to invest all of the family's fortunes, lost it all because it turned out to be an internet scam. So here we have a great example of making mistakes even when you have a very high IQ. So why do smart people make big mistakes? Well, there's 4 main areas we're going to touch on right now. So the first major area where smart people make mistakes is overconfidence. This is having an inflated sense of their ability to handle complex or different tasks. And take, for example, the chimney incident where that very intelligent lady failed to make some basic checks about her fitment down the chimney. Now, in business, that might relate to spending very little time on anything mundane, although it might be quite important. For example, finances, paying your vendors, making sure invoices go out on time, keeping on top of finances. Predominantly mundane work, but very important work. A business thrives only on its flow of cash through the business and needs to be handled with care and attention. On the deck of an aircraft carrier, it's obviously a very dangerous place, and it's important to keep your eye out on important things that are moving around, including aircraft coming in at high speed. Now, it's interesting that the Navy don't necessarily put experienced deckhands out on the deck. They actually put inexperienced people there because they have more dedication to the mundane and to ensuring that they don't screw up. Now, another key area of overconfidence is the ability to see connections between disparate ideas. Intelligent people are quite good at that, but that can often mean drawing conclusions that aren't backed up with data. So one particular area in business, or 2 particular areas in business that this can apply, is in marketing and in strategy, where there's data points that are collected about the strategy or the marketing, and they're linked up and connected, and there seems to be a pattern there. Yeah, of course, we all know the importance of getting customer feedback and real data. So jumping to conclusions about strategy or marketing by just being able to see patterns isn't necessarily the way forward, and overconfidence in those aspects can lead to business mistakes. A second major area where smart people make mistakes is overload or cognitive overload, taking on too many large and complex tasks and therefore missing some of the smaller tasks. Say, for example, they're driving and not navigating where they're going, or not driving very well because their mind is on solving a complex business problem. That's obviously quite dangerous. And in business, it might be just missing an appointment, an important client engagement, or letting somebody down because their attention is elsewhere. And that leads us into task saturation. So taking on too many tasks at once. One common mistake that's I think we've all perhaps made is texting while driving. It's very easy to be distracted by the texting, and seconds can go by leading to an accident whilst you're driving the car. Now, in business, that might be more like taking on too many projects, too many things, and being spread too thin. And there's a common saying that entrepreneurs don't starve, they drown, meaning they really have too much on and too many opportunities, not knowing which ones to focus on, and getting into task overload. Now, the third major area where smart people make mistakes is not having intelligence or smarts in other areas, what we might call common sense. And one of the things about common sense is it's not very common. So in the case of the lady in the chimney, you might say, well, she lacked common sense or a lack of knowledge about that particular incident, or trusting their son to their family fortune might also be another case of lack of knowledge in another area where he actually didn't know about scams and how prevalent they were. So his lack of knowledge in other areas is a key place where intelligent people make mistakes. So in business, that might be assuming that you can go into another market or with a new product, not realizing the difficulties and the details that come out over time. You may see all of the problems in your own area and think it's easy to switch to another area. Very common mistake in business. Now, this leads us to simplicity bias, or overcomplicating things, making something more complex than it needs to be and not doing the basic stuff very, very well. Now, I have had an incident with that myself. We had a Skillion ride system. It had many, many features and was very capable of doing lots of things, but it was very, very hard for us to sell. We switched away from that to a very simple product, at least simple to the consumer, made it much easier for us to sell. And take, for example, GoPro. Very successful company that actually started with a guy who was making wrist straps for cameras. Now, sometimes simplicity is the best way forward, and overcomplication is something that smart people can sometimes do, and it's a mistake. The fourth major area where smart people make mistakes is emotions. And to be fair, we all have emotions and we can all make mistakes regardless of our intelligence in this area. Emotions often are triggered very quickly in us, and often we don't know the root cause of why we have been triggered in perhaps a negative emotion. Stress, frustration, and intelligent people certainly have that in abundance. Sometimes very intelligent people have a very low EQ or emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, making this even worse. So take some examples like Isaac Newton, who, as we've said earlier, had a very, very high IQ. He had a blind spot because he was offended by the likes of Hooke and Leibniz, who had a different opinion about action at a distance, and they actually proved to be largely right. And perhaps if his emotions hadn't got in the way, he would have been successful, even more successful than he was. And of course, how this plays into the dynamics in our relationships. Business is so dependent on relationships with other people, and it's very easy for emotions to be triggered when we deal with people. Frustrations can come out in many, many ways, and intelligent people can fall into those traps. So what to do about that? There's many, many things. One of the things I use is the count to 10 tactic. If I need to take a break and need to let my emotions settle, I'll count to 10. If I've got more time, I can take a walk, I can talk to people about it, I can try to unpack that emotion, find the root cause of that emotion, and then deal with it rationally. Taking a pause, taking time can just definitely help us, and also realizing that emotions don't always have a logical basis. The emotions are there, and they can sometimes trigger us into making poor decisions. So those are the four major mistakes that we see entrepreneurs and business people and CEOs can make, but I think it applies to anyone in life. And getting ahead of yourself so that you don't make big mistakes is a very important skill to have. Not to say that failure isn't a part of life and to be expected. It certainly is, and we need to manage ourselves to understand, especially as a CEO and entrepreneur, how failure is so evident and obvious and common in our daily life. Now, if you have any comments, please leave them in the description. If you have any suggestions for future videos, we'd love to hear from you about that. And I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.